cold wind sweeps across the hills of Bethlehem. The grass bends, the night sky glows with scattered stars, and in the silence, a young shepherd boy listens. He hears the roar before he sees it. A lion, massive, hungry eyes locked on the smallest lamb in the flock. Most boys would run. Most boys should run. But this boy, he steps forward, a sling in one hand, courage in the other, fear pounding inside his chest like thunder. This is the moment that will define him long before the world ever learns his name. David, the shepherd who would one day become a king. But long before the crown, before the fame, before the giant fell, there was this night, this choice, this quiet proving ground where a nobody was shaped by God. And David takes one breath, one step, one swing of the sling, and everything changes. Hold that image. Because to understand the heart of David, you must first understand nights like this. The hills of Bethlehem are warm by day and cold by night. They stretch like waves frozen in the earth. Olive trees shiver in the wind. Wooden flutes echo softly through the valleys. This is where David lives. Not in a palace, not in a city, but out here, with sheep, with silence, with songs that rise to the sky when no one else is listening. He is the youngest son of Jesse, a boy overlooked, a boy forgotten during family decisions, a boy who smells of sheep and carries dust on his sandals. His brothers are soldiers. Strong, respected, tall, but David, he is ordinary. Too ordinary for the greatness ahead of him. At least that's what everyone thinks. Yet God often begins his greatest stories in the most hidden places, in the places humans ignore, in the hearts no one notices. And while the world sees a shepherd, heaven sees a king in training. David spends his days guiding sheep, touching the rough wool with gentle hands. He leads them to water, protects them from shadows. He sings while he works, his voice rising with the rhythm of the hills. These songs, they aren't written for crowds. They aren't crafted for applause. They are honest heart cries whispered to a God he has learned to trust. And every time a predator appears, every time danger circles the flock, David stands his ground. Because courage grows in the shadows long before it shines in front of crowds. Something is forming in him. Something strong, something steady. And this is where the story truly begins. Not on a battlefield, but here, in the quiet. One morning, Samuel the prophet walks into Bethlehem with fire in his spirit. God has spoken to him. King Saul has lost his way, and God has chosen a new king. The town trembles at Samuel's arrival. Jesse brings out his sons, lining them up like warriors before a great moment. Their armor shines. Their faces look strong. Everything about them says king. Samuel studies the oldest. Surely this must be God's choice. Tall, handsome, impressive. But then, a whisper from heaven. Do not look at the outward appearance. I look at the heart. One by one, each brother stands before Samuel. One by one, God says, not him. Confusion grows. Whispers circle the room. Jesse looks embarrassed. Samuel turns slowly and asks, "Is this all your sons?" Jesse hesitates, then forces out a quiet reply. "Well, there is the youngest, but he's out with the sheep, a king, forgotten, a future, ignored, a boy unseen." Samuel feels the weight of destiny in that moment. "Bring him," he says. "We won't sit down until he arrives." And someone runs into the fields of Bethlehem, into the wind, into the sunlight, calling out for David. The shepherd looks up, surprised, unprepared, still smelling of sheep. He walks toward a moment that will change everything. Yet he has no idea what waits for him, only that God has been shaping him all along. When David enters the room, time seems to pause. His brothers stare. Jesse frowns. Samuel feels the presence of God like a warm fire inside his chest. David isn't what they expected. Young, simple clothes, dirt on his hands, but his eyes. They hold something different, a quiet strength, a heart alive with worship. And God whispers again, "This is the one." Samuel lifts the horn of oil. It glistens in the light. He pours it on David's head, oil running down his hair, over his face, across his shoulders. In that moment, heaven marks him, God chooses him. Destiny takes root in his heart, like fire in dry grass. And yet, nothing changes around him. David is anointed king, but he still returns to the sheep. No throne, no crown, just obedience, just waiting, just faithfulness in the small things. Sometimes God chooses you long before the world sees you. Sometimes the anointing comes before the opportunity. And that waiting period, that hidden season, it's not punishment. It's preparation. David keeps serving, keeps singing, keeps protecting, keeps learning to trust God with everything he is. And none of it is wasted, because the day is coming when the world will need exactly what God built in David here. When no one was watching, war breaks out. Israel against the Philistines. Two armies face each other across a valley. Dust rises with every shout. Shields ring like thunder. Fear hangs thick in the air. And then he steps out. Goliath, a giant, a living mountain of iron and muscle, covered in armor, holding a spear heavier than most men. He roars with laughter, mocks Israel, mocks their God, challenges anyone brave enough to fight him. But no one moves. Even the strongest soldiers freeze. Even the bravest tremble. 40 days, morning and evening. The giant walks out and terrifies an entire nation. And during all of this, David is not even on the battlefield. He is carrying cheese and bread to his brothers. A simple errand, a small assignment, yet one God will use to change history. He arrives just as Goliath steps forward again. The mocking, the boasting, the threat. David stares at the giant, and something burns inside him. Not fear, not pride, but righteous anger, a holy fire. Who is this? David whispers. That he should defy the armies of the living God. And with that line, David's entire destiny begins to shift. Because this shepherd boy is about to face a giant, and the world will never be the same. Whispers race through the camp. Some laugh at David. Some mock him. Some shake their heads. A shepherd boy, talking like a warrior, standing like a man twice his age. But when word reaches King Saul, curiosity rises. A young voice speaking with fire always draws attention. David is brought into the king's tent. The air is thick with tension. Saul studies the boy standing before him. No armor, no fear, just faith. You cannot fight him, Saul says gently. You are only a boy, but David steps forward, eyes steady. Your servant has killed lions and bears. God delivered me from them. He will deliver me from this giant too. Saul hears something he hasn't heard in a long time. Confidence, courage, trust in God. He nods slowly, against all logic, against all appearances. He gives David permission. A shepherd boy is about to defend a nation. Saul tries to place armor on David. Heavy metal plates, a helmet too big, a sword too long. David takes one step, another, it feels wrong. It feels heavy. It feels like trying to fight someone else's way. He shakes his head. I cannot wear this. Sometimes the biggest step toward destiny is learning to walk in who God made you to be, not who others expect you to be. David takes the armor off. He grabs his staff, his sling, and walks slowly toward a river. The water is crystal clear. Sunlight dances across the surface like tiny sparks. He kneels, touches the water, and selects 5 smooth stones. Each one fits perfectly into his hand. He places them in his pouch. Simple, ordinary, nothing impressive, but in God's hands, even ordinary becomes unstoppable. And David steps toward the battlefield, toward the shouts, toward the giant no one else dared face. Every step echoes with purpose. A shepherd boy against a warrior, a sling against a sword, faith against fear. The valley holds its breath. Goliath sees David approaching. His laughter shakes the air like a storm. Am I a dog? He roars, that you come at me with sticks. He curses David by his gods. He promises to tear him apart. He belittles him, mocks him, intimidates him. But David doesn't flinch. He stands in the shadow of a giant and speaks with the fire of heaven. You come to me with sword and spear, he says, but I come to you in the name of the Lord. The giant steps forward. The earth trembles. Israel gasps. Even the Philistines grow quiet. Then it happens. David places a stone inside the sling. The rope wraps around his fingers. The wind rushes in his ears. The world seems to slow. He swings. Once, twice, 3 times. And he releases. The stone cuts through the air like a streak of destiny. A single heartbeat. A single impact. A single miracle. The giant falls. Face down, like a toppled mountain. Silence. Complete silence. A shepherd boy just defeated the impossible. With a stone. And a faith bigger than fear. Israel erupts in shouts. Philistines scatter. History shifts. David steps into a new chapter of his calling. But this victory, it will also set in motion battles he never expected. Battles not against giants, but against jealousy, against betrayal, against the throne itself. Because God may open doors, but not everyone will celebrate when you walk through them. David returns from the battlefield a hero. Songs rise in the streets. Children dance. Women clap their hands. Saul has slain his thousands. They sing, but David his tens of thousands. The song lights a spark inside Saul, but not a good one. Not pride, not joy, jealousy, dark, cold, dangerous. He watches David closely. Every victory, every praise, every smile from the people. And insecurity grows inside the king like a shadow spreading through his heart. But David Peak continues to serve faithfully. He plays music to calm Saul's troubled spirit. He leads soldiers with honor. He loves the people with humility. He never asks for a crown, never demands recognition, never tries to replace Saul. Yet Saul's jealousy turns into rage. He throws spears at David, tries to trap him, tries to end him. David flees for his life. The enemies behind him, mountains ahead of him. Friends, confused. He goes from palace halls to lonely caves, from celebration to hiding, from victory to fear. But even in the caves, God is not done with him. Sometimes your darkest places become the training ground for your greatest purpose. David sits in a cave called Adullam. The air is cold, water drips from the ceiling. His heart is heavy, his future unclear. He was anointed king. Yet now, he sleeps on stones. He was chosen. Yet now, he is chased. But in this place, something beautiful happens. Men in distress gather around him. Broken men, rejected men, men with nothing left. David becomes their leader, their refuge, their brother, and slowly, this group of outcasts becomes an army of mighty warriors. Not because David had power, but because David had character. This hidden season is shaping him, strengthening him, teaching him compassion, teaching him patience, teaching him to trust God when life makes no sense, and it is here, in this cave, where many of David's most powerful psalms are born. Songs of pain, songs of hope, songs that still comfort the world thousands of years later. What comes from our darkest nights often becomes someone else's guiding light. But David's journey is not finished. The throne is still ahead. The promise is still alive. God's timing is still perfect. And the day is coming when everything in David's life, his courage, his faith, his scars, his songs, will lead him toward the moment he has waited for. A moment that will shake the nation and reveal the kind of king God desires. Years pass. Battles rise and fall. Saul's heart grows darker, and David continues to run. Through deserts, through forests, across cliffs and ravines, always one step ahead of the king who wants him dead. But even with fear pressing against him, David refuses to lift his hand against Saul, even when he has the chance. Even when his men whisper, "This is your moment," because David knows something deeper. You cannot take by force what God promised by grace. One night, in a cave, Saul sleeps only a few feet away. David quietly approaches. The torchlight flickers on the blade in his hand. His men watch, breathless. One strike, one moment, one decision. But instead of killing Saul, David cuts a small piece of Saul's robe. Just enough to prove he was there. Just enough to show mercy. He steps outside the cave. The morning sun rises behind him, and David shouts, "My father, look, I could have harmed you, but I will not. For you are the Lord's anointed." Saul trembles. He breaks down in tears. He knows David is the better man, the true future king. Yet the jealousy remains, and the chase continues. But David's mercy that day becomes a doorway, a sign of the kind of king he is becoming, a king after God's own heart. Section 5. When the promise finally arrives, the day no one expected finally comes. Saul falls in battle. A tragic end to a once great king. News spreads across Israel like a cold wind. People weep. The nation mourns. Even David tears his clothes in grief. Because even though Saul hunted him, David honors him, forgives him, respects the position God once gave him. And after the mourning, after the silence, the elders of Israel gather around David. Gray-haired men, battle-worn soldiers, families carrying hope in their eyes. They come to Hebron, a small city, a historic moment. David stands among them, humble, weathered by years of running, stronger because of every trial. And they speak the words destiny has waited for. "You shall be king over Israel." They pour oil over his head, warm, fragrant, flowing down like the oil Samuel poured all those years ago. But this time, it is not a secret anointing. It is a coronation. A nation rising under a shepherd king. The crowd shouts, trumpets ring across the hills. Hope sparks in every home. David steps onto the throne of Israel. Not because he forced his way there. Not because he was the strongest, but because he trusted God's timing. Even when the waiting hurt, this is the moment heaven prepared him for. Not the giant, not the songs, not the victories, but the heart behind it all. A heart shaped in fields, in caves, in valleys, in worship, in surrender. David becomes the king Israel desperately needs. A king who leads with courage, with humility, with compassion. A king who remembers the hills where God first called his name. Years into his reign, David sits on his balcony overlooking Jerusalem. The city glows beneath the stars. Children laugh in the streets. Soldiers guard the gates. Peace finally breathes over the land. Yet David feels a longing, a holy ache, a desire to build something for God. A resting place for the ark. A temple unlike anything ever seen. He shares this dream with the prophet Nathan. But that night, God speaks a breathtaking message. "David, you want to build me a house, but I will build you a house. Your throne will last forever. Your kingdom will never end." A covenant, a promise, a miracle far beyond the imagination of a shepherd boy. David falls to his knees. Tears fill his eyes. He whispers, "Who am I, Lord, that you have brought me this far?" He sees his entire journey flash before him. The sheep, the hills, the lion, the giant, the palace, the caves. He realizes something powerful. Every moment, good or painful, was guided by a faithful God. He bows deeper, a king humbled before the King of Kings, and in that moment, we see the true miracle of David's story. Not the throne, not the victories, but the heart of a man who never let success replace surrender. This is the moment that defines him forever. David's life whispers a message to every generation. A message to the forgotten, the overlooked, the underestimated. You don't need a perfect background for God to write a perfect story. You don't need approval from people to walk in your calling. You don't need the strength of a giant when God is your strength. David shows us that greatness begins in hidden places. in quiet prayers, in lonely moments, in unseen faithfulness. He teaches us that waiting is not wasting, that God's timing is worth trusting, that mercy is stronger than revenge, and most of all, that a heart surrendered to God can change the world. Maybe your life feels like David's in the early chapters. Small, ordinary, unnoticed, or maybe you're in the middle chapters running, questioning, hiding. Wherever you are, God is preparing you, shaping you, strengthening you, calling you. Your story isn't over. Your giant isn't final. Your cave is not your grave. God is building something in you, long before anyone sees it, and when the time is right, He will open a door no one can shut. If David's journey touched your heart today, you are not alone. Someone else needs this reminder. Someone else needs this hope. Share this story with them. Send it to someone walking through their own valley. And if you want more stories like this, more faith, more courage, more hope, rising in the middle of real life, make sure you subscribe, because this channel isn't just about Bible stories. It's about your story, your calling, your future. And like David, your best chapters are still ahead. Until next time, keep walking, keep trusting, keep your heart open. God is not done writing your story.